Hello, everyone. This is Pavna Tur, founder of Shenomics, a platform to help women live and lead from within. I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome our guest mentor for today, Vaishali Kasture, who's going to talk to us about how women can leverage sponsors at work to advance in their careers. A very important topic because for years we believed that what women really needed to advance is mentorship, but now all of the studies and all of the evidence is showing us otherwise, and telling us that it's sponsorship, not mentorship, that's really going to help women rise to leadership positions. But before we dig into this very interesting topic, I want to quickly introduce Vaishali. So Vaishali has had, she's an investment banker by profession, and she's had a long, illustrious career in the corporate space, I believe close to over 20 years at this point in various leadership positions, including the most recent one, which was managing director and board member at Goldman Sachs India. And she's a fantastic role model for women in the financial industry and even broadly. And she takes a very keen interest in helping and supporting other women as well, which is absolutely wonderful. And when she's not helping other women, you can find her participating in some marathon or another because she's a fitness enthusiast and an avid runner. In fact, how many marathons have you done at this point, Vaishali?
Honestly, I don't remember.
You've lost track, right?
I'll have to count all my medals and get back to you.
Wonderful. Well, great. Well, I'm really glad to have you here discussing this great topic. So very warm welcome to you. We're talking about sponsorship. So if you can just begin with helping us demystify what sponsorship is, because I think we all have a sense of what mentorship is, but sponsorship is very different. So can you just lay out the differences and for us? Yeah.
Sure. So I think, I always say this, that especially when it comes to women, women are over-mentored and under-sponsored. And, it's about time that we change that. Every time I talk to a woman, she will come up with a list of at least 4 or 5 mentors at any point of time. But I don't think she will actively either know what a sponsor is or know if any of her mentors are in a position to now take that relationship to the next level and sponsor her. So I think there are a couple of key differences here. But if I were to kind of start off saying that mentors matter, but they are not your ticket to the top, whereas a sponsor is your ticket to the top job. And mentors will take interest in you. They will guide you. They will advise you. They will give you a lend you a shoulder if you need to talk about any of your problems. They will help you to build your network. But I think essentially what a sponsor will do differently is, first of all, a sponsor has absolute unchattering faith and belief in your abilities to deliver. I think that's very, very important. Second is the sponsor will advocate for you when the time is right. The sponsor is powerful and influential enough and has a seat at the table when discussions are happening about your career. They have the ability to tilt the tide with their voice because they have that crucial seat at the table when you're being discussed. And of course, in return, the sponsor will expect fantastic performance and committed loyalty to him or her. So I think that's a little bit, in a nutshell, of what a sponsor can do for your career versus what a mentor can do. And I think both are equally important for women. But I think women are underinvested when it comes to sponsorship today.
And I guess it all boils down to figuring out who really has power or decision-making ability in the organization. And while a mentor can help you, and like you said, it is important in helping with day-to-day challenges on the job, but when it comes to advancing in an organization, you really have to look at where the power centers are. And that's where you can find these sponsors who can really help you if they, like you said, if they put in the right word for you in the right places.
Absolutely.
Great.
They are, to summarize, I would say sponsors have the juice. whereas mentors perhaps don't.
Right. So, and when we look at sponsorship, it's not just that it helps women. I feel like it's a win-win situation because it also helps the sponsor and it also helps the organization itself. So, what what would you say about that? What are the broadly the benefits of sponsorship?
Yeah. So, I think definitely, like I just spoke, sponsorship helps, the protege, whether it is a man or a woman, to significantly advance their career in a very meaningful manner, knowing that somebody's got their back. I think essentially a sponsor is someone who will surgically analyze your performance and tell you where you're good, where you screwed up, what you need to do better, and they will encourage you to take risks. So they're literally like a very they're kind of your 360 degree in a very focused, perhaps a tad harsh, but they will tell you exactly the way it is without mincing their words. Definitely helps the protege, but I think what it also helps the organization, because there are a lot of high performing people out there, whether male or female, but I especially find this true, of women, that women will put their nose down, get the job done, and then wait for their career to advance when someone senior notices them and said, "Oh, I didn't know you've been, working so hard," or "I had no idea that you had delivered such a stellar performance on these projects." So women would have a heads down approach, which men would possibly have more of a heads up approach in trying to articulate what they've done and talk a lot about it. So, what sponsorship, formal or informal sponsorship, will help the organization identify high potential talent in a very meaningful manner, and then identify sponsors who are willing to literally throw their weight behind them for a couple of years in order to progress and advance their career. Today, the organizations are always saying, the Fortune 500 companies, everybody reads this survey saying there are about 30% women in senior management, but less than 3% in the C suite. So, sponsorship is perhaps one of the tools to try and fast track the careers uh, of women and getting them into that C suite in, whatever, the next 5, 10, 15 years. So it is, in my mind, absolutely an, an imperative that organizations do this in a both formal and informal manner.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you talked about how men and women view how to get ahead quite differently at times. And I know I definitely made this mistake early on in my career as well, where I believe the same thing that you just keep your head down, work as hard as you possibly can, and sooner or later somebody will pay attention, and that may or may not happen. So what do you say to women who find the notion of doing anything other than just simply working hard to be somewhat I don't know, inauthentic or dirty, or they feel uncomfortable about other ways of advancing their careers? How do we what do we say what do you say
Right.
to those women?
Yeah. A lot of women ask me, but I find it really awkward to talk about myself. And there was a recent study that I read that when it comes, there's a key fundamental difference between men and women. And when it comes to praising other people or negotiating on behalf of other people, women do exceptionally well. And when it comes to negotiating for themselves, men do exceptionally well. So I think it's a little bit genetic. It's also perhaps a little bit in the Indian context. There is that added layer where women are taught not to put themselves first. So I think it's cultural, it's genetic, a combination of both. But fact is, it is what it is. So I think women have to put that behind them, and say, if you're in a corporate context, uh, you have to self advocate. There's a difference between a worker bee and a queen bee. The worker bee will put her head down, work hard exceptionally, and hope and pray that one day she gets recognized, whereas a queen bee will network, negotiate, look around the table, figure out what's happening in the organization, and insert herself in a meaningful manner in the right context. But before I even get to that, a couple of key things that women must self-reflect. One is there is advocacy is not blatant advocacy. Then it's noise. If it needs to be music, it needs to be first the woman has to identify what are your strengths, what are you really good at, what have you delivered, what do you get to the organization, or what is your brand, which is a little different from what other men and women get on the table. So reflect on your strengths and achievements a little bit, then know when to advocate for yourself. There is a time, a situation, a context, a frequency. It's not like every day you come into work and talk about everything that you've done. So if you figure out your strengths and figure out who are the couple of key people that you want to post at regular intervals with the right mix of giving credit to the team and then taking the ownership of being the leader behind that success, I think you'll be surprised as to how many people want to really listen to what you have to say. Also, in the context of who are you going to talk to about your about your achievements or what you've done at regular frequencies, identify people for whom your success is going to be information to help them be successful. Are there senior people globally or in your job who are really keen that even if you move the needle on something small, it's going to be great for their jobs or their careers? And find those, draw those Venn diagrams and find the common area of people who really want to listen to your success because it's relevant for them as well. So I think done in the right manner, you can definitely advocate your brand, and not can, you should and you have to, because it is it's not the only, but it's an important part of your career progression.
So, I mean, basically, what you're saying is one has to be a little bit strategic about advocating for oneself as well. It's not just blindly you're tooting your own horn. You're really reflecting on, okay, what is it that you bring to the table? Where do you add value? And then find those points of commonality with a sponsor, let's say in the organization, that can really also benefit from that.
Precisely.
Great. Well, so this actually leads to my next question. So when we're and I think you've already answered it to a great extent. How do we go about identifying a good or effective sponsor? So, what should we be looking out for?
I think it's not and I say this with a lot of caution that a sponsor may or may not be your role model. There's a difference between having a mentor is more like someone you relate to, a little bit of a role model context. Whereas in the case of sponsorship, I don't mean to say it in a dirty way, but it is quite a transactional relationship where you benefit because someone is willing to throw their weight behind you because they believe in your ability to deliver and do a great job, and therefore they are willing to throw their weight behind them. But what it means for the sponsor is that they are throwing their brand, which they've taken a very long time to build. They're throwing their own credibility behind your success or failure. And therefore, they expect, like I said, you know, stellar performance and extreme loyalty to back them. So if you're going about identifying, a sponsor, scan the ecosystem. Look at who are the senior people in the organization who have power and who have influence. Then try and identify which of those sponsors would benefit by projects that you're working on, or your day-to-day role, or something which you are going to do, which is going to also add credibility to the sponsors ecosystem and their own careers and jobs going ahead. So I think a combination of what's in it for you and what's in it for the sponsor and what's the sweet spot, that's the way to go and identify a sponsor. Also, don't put, word of caution, don't put all your eggs in one basket. senior leadership churn happens, in organizations. People move into different parts of the world. They move into different functions. Some senior people tend to leave the organization periodically. So spread your risk. Try and look for, at least, at any point of time, I would, guess, at least two strong sponsors, preferably in different geographies, but who have direct line and visibility into what you're doing on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, great. So once we've identified these one or two sponsors within an organization, how do we then go about building a relationship with this person so that he or she would be invested in our career as well? Like, how do we practically go about doing that?
Right. And also, before you actually identify your sponsor, I think you've identified your sponsor, and before you get to a stage where you can have a conversation where you believe you can ask the sponsor for his or her sponsorship, I think there's a lot of legwork that you need to do for, in front of the sponsor, to demonstrate why you're worthy of sponsorship. There is no dirt or lack of proteges for the sponsor if you've picked the right person, but you will need to prove over a period of time that you are capable of delivering the goods, that you are worthy of their trust, and you have the credibility to ask them for their sponsorship. So once you have done this legwork, then I think it's good to have an honest discussion with the sponsor and say that you're someone I look up to. You have visibility into what I do. This is how I fit into your world. So there's a little bit of here, not directly, but a little covertly. Here is how you could benefit because I am, say, working in India, or I'm in Bangalore. I'm in this division. This is the kind of work that I do. This is the information I have access to. So the sponsor also believes that he or she is to benefit and have that conversation. In the unlikely event that the sponsor says no, there's no bad blood, graciously accept that perhaps the timing is not right, and move on to the next sponsor. Don't be shy of asking for sponsorship if you've spent a fair amount of time, or the sponsor has had enough time to observe you at work. Just because you're afraid of getting a no doesn't mean that you should ask. You should not ask. So I think that those are a couple of things that you should keep in mind. And once you've earned the sponsorship, make sure that you get enough time with your sponsor. It is important that you keep her updated of your progress, of progress or otherwise, or something that you is not going too well. And also, you need to figure that at your level, you are the eyes and ears of the sponsor on the ground. It is your job now to make sure that they are not blindsided about anything going on, either in your role or in your function or in your country or whatever your extent of coverage is. Your job is now to also protect the sponsor and give them a heads up if anything is going wrong.
Okay, great. So, one of the things that sometimes gets in the way when we're informally trying to build a relationship with a sponsor, I agree, formally, one can definitely go about doing exactly what you said, but informally, sometimes it can be challenging for women, for logistical reasons, because after work, for many of us, our priorities are to go home to our families or to our kids, so we can't always go out for drinks with the boys or what have you. Or there could be cultural factors or sensitive issues at play as well, right? Because especially when, let's say, the sponsor is male, so there are all these notions or concerns about how developing that relationship with a male sponsor could be perceived. So how does one sort of deal with all of those issues?
I think the reason I'm smiling so much is that it is an absolute fact today that, especially as the women grow more senior, 90%, more than 90% of the sponsors are always senior, older men, and the protege is a younger woman. And there is always a question mark or a connotation to that kind of a relationship, especially when you're meeting your sponsor outside of work. And if you look at sponsorship, I mean, whether it's male, 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 female, or whatever it may be, in order to have a very effective sponsor protege relationship, you need to invest time and get to know your sponsor well. The sponsor needs to get to know his or her protege really well. You need to meet periodically, you need to talk, you need to connect, and that's how the sponsorship equation grows. It can be extremely difficult for a woman, both psychologically, to ask her a sponsor out that should we catch up for dinner today, or should we catch up in the evening after work, so that you're not getting disturbed by phone calls. And it can be physically restricting as well, because women always have their eye on the watch. You have responsibilities, you want to go home, there are a lot of things weighing on your mind towards the end of the day. So how do you make this work? Again, like, there is no silver bullet. First of all, the construct is difficult. You have to acknowledge that the sexual tension between a male and a female relationship is not going to go away. But there are several things that you can do to try and kind of mitigate that. And the advice that I tend to give most women is that, ask for a meeting outside office. It doesn't always have to be a dinner meeting. It can be a lunch. It can be an early morning breakfast meeting before work. Second, make sure that you have also built a good reputation for yourself, and that you're not caught in several cases, or make sure that you yourself have a fairly clean reputation when it comes to work. You have to relentlessly telegraph a professional message going from you, whether it's your body language, the way you talk, the way you communicate, the way you dress. You have to, especially when it comes to a sponsor, display utmost professionalism. Never be caught in a situation where you are displaying mixed emotions towards your sponsor. uh, Eventually, also, I think it's important that you make sure that you communicate with your sponsor that your emotional needs have been met. You make yourself a safe bet. You come across as a strong woman with a strong family, good emotional background. You are able to take care of yourself personally and emotionally. Then a sponsor will see, okay, this lady is a safe bet. I can absolutely, I would love to invest time with her. If possible, introduce your spouse or significant other to your sponsor. That tends to ease kind of the situation. Take it a step further. You can meet for dinner, invite the sponsor and his or her significant other or wife, take your spouse along, so that you make it a strong, meaningful social interaction, and those kind of tensions melt away. If in doubt, if you find people talking about you, I've always felt the best approach is triage. Confront your detractors head on. You know your status is special. You're a protege. Take pride in it. Keep it clean. Confront them and tell them about your sponsor. And finally, if you ever find yourself in a situation of free fall, I think you need to rip the cord and get out of that situation. So, just some advice and
Yeah,
tips.
those are some really great tips. Finally, I just love to hear your own personal experience with sponsorship, both being on the receiving end, and I know you also actively mentor a lot of women. So I just love to hear what you've seen and how you've seen it work.
When I started my career about 23 years back, I hadn't even heard of the word mentor or sponsor. But as I reflect on my journey increasingly, and I look back, everything from my first job to my most recent job, uh, there has always I have never been a part of a formal sponsorship program, but as I reflect on my own career journey, there has always been someone really strong, powerful, influential, uh, who may have incidentally started off as a skeptic, and who has over time, thrown his weight behind my career. And whether it means egging me to take that hot job or giving me a job which I, I could not imagine that I had the ability or the credibility or the skills to deliver. Uh, Watched my back, told me when I fell down and made a mistake, yelled at me when I think did anything absolutely unacceptable, and richly rewarded me and surprised me by promoting me ahead of time. So so those are the people who over time I must have demonstrated that I am worthy enough to warrant their attention, and that I will not let them down if there's a sticky situation in the organization. So I think I've been lucky to have the sponsorship of senior people, but I'm sure I must have worked hard enough, to earn it. When it comes to me sponsoring, proteges, I think I have been both a part of the formal sponsorship programs, and b also informally I sponsored a lot of men and women. So when it comes to informal sponsorship, particularly, being senior in the organization, I do have visibility into a lot of people at the middle and junior management level, and there's always someone out there you know who comes into a meeting and absolutely blows my socks off. I do watch people for repeat performances. I like it when I see young talent out there, and I do reach out to them, have conversations, set up a couple of meetings. People are very eager when they get when someone senior reaches out to them. Build a relationship over time so that you understand what they bring to the table. Eventually, I like to tell people that hey, I want to be your keep up, and this is what I expect from you. And then it's usually sponsorship, informal sponsorship is particularly important when it comes to things like career progression and promotions. When I have seen someone close an action and I want to throw my weight behind them, I make sure that I tell them that I'm going to be your sponsor. So, you know what? I'm putting my credibility behind you. So, you need to now deliver the goods and give me a heads up and don't let me down. So, I think I've done a lot of, in fact, my informal sponsorship has been, pretty successful in the past. When it comes to formal sponsorship, also, I have been assigned as a sponsor, several times for people, in both middle and senior management. And some relationships have gone incredibly well. And I've kind of met what was expected from me as a sponsor, and I can see their careers growing. Some have not gone so well, and I have felt at some stage that I am not willing to throw my weight behind this candidate because I don't think they are worthy of my sponsorship. I've stepped away and informed the sponsorship program that this is not a candidate in my mind who will meet expectations, and I need to step away. So I think it's kind of worked both ways.
Okay, great. Well, for all the men and women you have decided to throw your weight behind, I have to say they're very lucky men and women indeed to be mentored or sponsored by you. So I'm sure that's a fantastic opportunity. Vaishali, I want to thank you for this great discussion we've had today, because clearly all of the evidence and research is telling us that sponsorship really is the way to go for women who are really serious about rising in their careers and getting to those leadership positions. So I think you've given us a very good overview of what sponsorship is and how women can go about getting a sponsor themselves. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Bhavna. I just want to leave you with one line which I always quote, which is from Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. And this is especially for women who have had the benefit of being mentored and sponsored. And they need to keep an eye out for the younger women who are coming up through the ranks, which is that there is a special place in hell for women who don't help. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I could just take the flip side of that, I would say there's a special place in heaven for women who decide to help other women.
Well said.
So great. All right. Thank you, Vishali.
Thank you so much.